Welcome in to the Cover 5 podcast. I am your host at Jordan Vanek DFS over on Twitter. As always, joined by my co-host Hilo at HiloFF on Twitter. Hilo, we got a 9-game main slate this weekend. So we're going to be talking about 5 of the games. So we're going to get over half the games narrowed down for all of you listeners out there that are playing this week 16. We're in week 16 main slate.
Where am I?
It's been a wild season. This one is a very interesting slate because we've got a ton of injuries. How do you treat a game or a slate that has a lot fewer games? You get more concentrated on your builds, or overstacking becomes more popular? Like, what are some tips you have for a 9 slater?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it with the overstacking. Because fewer games means fewer opportunities for another game to match something if it absolutely erupts. And we've been talking about that like theoretical perspective of scoring is down. So if a game does erupt, then it becomes that much more valuable to your build. So yeah, overstacking becomes more important. There's a one game that we're going to talk about today where I'm super intrigued to do just that. And then the value piece, there's typically less value, fewer options for value on a shorter slate. So it makes this weird dynamic where everyone's going to want to paying up for exposure to the final game on the slate, which we're going to talk about at the end of this pod, being the Miami and the Dallas game. So how do you get there? Or do you have to overexpose yourselves to fragility to get there because there's no real value? So it becomes this weird, it creates this weird dynamic on slates like this, which I absolutely love because it becomes a little bit more theoretical and how I get different. And we'll talk a little bit about that here. So yeah.
No, I'm very excited for it. That Miami Dolphins game, I have something intriguing to say that I didn't write up today, but I really wanted to get to. Is just I started playing around with lineups, and it's just you're right. The value just is not there for a lot of players. But let's get into it. Let's kick it off to you. Cleveland traveling to Houston. Just looking at the injury reports between these two teams, you could field the team that's probably a winning football team because, I mean, on the IR, we know Nick Chubb's gone. You know,
Mhm.
Conklin's gone. Del Pitt, Dewan Jones, who replaced Conklin, Jedrick Willis, who's also a really good player. They have 4 defensive players like Juwan Thornhill, a linebacker, and a few other guys out. And then
Yeah.
Houston's got obviously Tank Dell on IR. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 offensive linemen on the
Yeah.
IR. Their slot corner, Tavir Thomas, who's really good from what I saw of him this season. Very physical slot corner. Perfected what D'Amico Ryans wanted. And then you have guys like Will Anderson, Blake Cashman, CJ Stroud, and a ton of other people questionable. Hilo, how are you playing this game? Are you getting to that Joe Flacco magic that has been crushing it in the recent weeks?
You know I am.
I,
You know I
I
am.
figured, dude. Air
This
yards, everything.
this is the game that I was referring to earlier that I am extremely interested to overstack because I think the field is going to largely overlook this game. It's in the bottom half of game totals. It carries a modest 41.0 game total. And I think the field is just automatically going to overlook it. When you like boil it down, like the upside case is kind of twofold. We have a Browns team that over their last 3 games, Joe Flacco has averaged 44.3 pass attempts per game. He has pass attempts of 44, 44, and 45. So they very clearly recognize that we have injuries up front. We're just going to let Joe Flacco go out and do Joe Flacco things, which is a beautiful thing. It is I question the signing of Joe Flacco. I was like, this team they want to like be slow paced and like just run the ball, move the ball methodically. No, they are like Joe Flacco, lead us there, dude. And the contract that he signed is like exactly that. They're like, dude, if you get us to the wild card round, we're going to give you 250K. You get us to the divisional round, bro. Here's another 500. You get us to the conference championship here, dude. Here's a cool milli. You win a Super Bowl, bro. Here's an extra 2.5 mil. So it's like he's very clear. They're just like, yo, dude, go do your thing. We've run through 3 quarterbacks already. Let's see what we got here. So that is awesome. That's a plus. On the other side, the positive for the case to be made for upside is Bobby Slowick. Like, yes, CJ Stroud being out is very clearly a dent to this team's upside. But as we continue to see, Bobby Slowick is going to do what he can to maximize the talent that he has. We have Nico Collins, who has seen a 36% target share against man coverage, now playing a Cleveland defense that it is in man coverage at the highest rate in the league. We have Noah Brown, who has been useful when given opportunities. I played the hell out of him last week. So we also have Devin Singletary. Don't forget about Mr. Devin Singletary. We talked about the lack of value. Devin Singletary is priced right around where the perceived top value play of the slate is in Ty Chandler. He has a much better matchup. So all of this kind of comes together. To me, this game has a ton of upside. And now we didn't even talk about like the desperation factor. Cleveland and Houston, they need to keep winning games. They are not scot-free. This is borderline a must win for both of them. So if things start happening in this game, if there is an ignition, if there's some striking force that sends this game into orbit, it's not coming down because both of these teams have the pieces to like make it happen. So now you look at the Cleveland Browns. They have had a positive pass rate over expectation for 3 games in a row with Joe Flacco. That has not happened at any other point of time in this season. We talked about his pass attempts. Amari Cooper, he saw 5 targets in just over a quarter's worth of play in the first game and then missed the rest of the game. Over the subsequent 2 games with Joe Flacco, he attempted 89 passes in those 2 games, and David Njoku and Amari Cooper combined for 44 of those targets for a tidy 49% target share. So even more interesting to me is the fact that in David Njoku's high target game, Amari Cooper saw 8 targets. They combined for 22 targets. In Amari Cooper's high target game, where he saw 14, David Njoku saw 8. So they basically, if you were to tell me there is this pass catcher on this slate that is priced at 11.7 or 11.6, 11.7, the combined salaries of David Njoku and Amari Cooper, and he was highly likely to see 22 targets, would you play him? My answer is yeah. That's like Christian McCaffrey circa 3 years ago, team jam him in, David Johnson, and like Le'Veon Bell in their heyday. Like, yeah, I'm going to jam them in and work around it. That's kind of what we get with this pass offense this week. And you compare those 2 guys with Joe Flacco, who's priced at like 5,500, and get this nice little team overstack that carries significant upside and a solid floor. You can bring it back with Nico Collins. We talked about his splits in man and zone. You can bring it back with Devin Singletary, who I think what we saw last week, Dameon Pierce played only 5 offensive snaps. And I think that was for a very specific reason. And the reason is Devin Singletary basically across the board in efficiency metrics doubles Dameon Pierce's efficiency in zone read gap rushing. And that is what this team with Bobby Slowick wants to do. So Dameon Pierce, we've talked about it before. He's kind of a one read and go up the field burst type running back. He has struggled with diagnosing where the hole is going to be in a zone concept run gap scheme. So that is kind of like why Devin Singletary was up to 75% snap rate last week, is like he's just very clearly the better fit in this run game. So we look at what he's done recently. He's had extreme workload and in a spot against Cleveland. And this is most important to me from this spot. And I think the field is probably going to miss it. The Cleveland Browns are on the road this week. Their defense ranks number 1 in the league in points allowed per game at home. They rank dead last in the league in points allowed on the road. 30.7 points per game allowed on the road this season. Yes, like there's a lot of noise built into home road splits, but that is striking to go from like the top defense in the league at home to the worst defense in the league on the road. And being on the road, I just like this game for a ton of upside.
I do not believe I will be getting to Joe Flacco this weekend, but I do like David Njoku. I didn't get to Amari Cooper just because I felt like if I'm not going to the Flacco stack, like Amari Cooper at 6,400 for me with the way I'm playing. You have DK Metcalf at 67, Ridley at 63, ton of other options in that 6K range that I personally prefer, and it's not, I mean, again, I don't disagree with the thought process behind 22 targets, a guy that's going to just throw to those two players. My biggest fear for this game is Myles Garrett ruining it. Like, I get that Bobby Slowick, again, we've loved this game all season long. It was very clear that, like, look, he was even struggling and CJ Stroud was bailing him out. We've stacked that team a ton of times. The Case Keenum scheme was pretty rough, and it took for the Titans to lose Amani Hooker, Murphy Bunning, Jeffrey Simmons, like a ton of their key guys to run their scheme to just not be there. Where it's like, okay, now we can move the ball effectively. And like the broken play to Devin Singletary on the 40-yard catch, the holding call that Devin Singletary got screwed on. You had a great call with Noah Brown this past week. That was one of the guys that I didn't have interest in, and he absolutely crushed. Case Keenum actually won the tournament in a few, or my double spot, I think. I think it was a double spot.
Yeah.
He won it somehow. Well, because the guy jammed Chris McCaffrey and a bunch of other 40-point scorers. I think it was David Njoku as well. Like, it was something just sick. But anywho, getting back to the point, I think Flacco is an awesome pivot off of Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins is going to take a lot of it away because people won't believe into Joe Flacco. And when you're game stacking, like, it's a lot easier to sell yourself on like the Detroit Lions than it is to sell yourself on this current Texans team. The one thing with Nico Collins that worries me, I guess, is probably the motion. Like, I want to see him be the motion guy. Like, we're going to get man coverage here. Let's motion him and be like creative that way, because I don't want him to just line up and go one-on-one with Denzel Ward. Like, I love Nico Collins.
I'd say it's probably likely that it's going to be Noah Brown that is the motion man here, just based on previous usage, which is fine. You can play him too. But yeah,
it's I want to see the dude in motion, because motion just confuses man, or at least motion to his side and keep Nico inside and let Noah Brown come out. So it just makes it, just theoretically speaking, if you're watching the game and you see Nico Collins eating, it's probably because of that. I don't think he's capable of just lining up against Denzel Ward and just winning. That's going to be
watch, man.
Hey, they matched up in college too, Michigan and Ohio State. So, anywho, let's move forward. Let's go on to the next game. Oh, last thing, no running backs in this one.
Yeah, Singletary.
Okay, I'm not getting into Jerome Ford. That Jerome Ford is a no-go for me. But
he just plays every snap of the first drive and then sits until the fourth quarter. Like, what the hell, dude?
I mean, they're just the Joe Flacco Bomber team now. That's just what they do. But let's move forward to the game that I was just talking about. Detroit Lions are traveling to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Detroit Lions, they've got a ton of injuries. Jerry Jacobs, their corner, is out. Jerry Jacobs, his splits on and off the field are significant. It is strange to see how bad they become as a secondary when he is off the field. I did not expect to see that with that, but that's just the way it works. The Vikings have a ton of players that are questionable on the defense. Byron Murphy is out. I think that the field, this is a chalk game, I feel like, with these two teams, and I don't think it necessarily fails. In the way that I'm going to attack it, there's multiple plays in that game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Vikings that showed me what I think coaches are going to do against this Brian Flores game. And in particular, Ben Johnson is one of the best, obviously, offense coordinators in football right now. He's amazing at getting his guys in space and these different things. The Vikings run this hybrid Tampa 2 where Harrison Smith is the middle linebacker that's pulling vertical in the middle of the field. The Bengals had multiple opportunities to hit him over the top. They had a ton, like Charlie Jones should have had a 55-yard touchdown. I think there's two other plays with like Ken Irwin and someone else. Harrison Smith is playing that area of the field like one of the best players in football. He is jumping these in-breaking routes.
Yeah.
I think if I'm Ben Johnson, Jameson Williams is coming along finally. They're starting to get like, okay, like we have a rhythm where we have a top or tight end in Sam Laporta. This dude's just balling. We have Jameson Williams who's starting to come on as a deep threat. We know what amon-ra is. We have Jahmyr Gibbs that's electric. We have David Montgomery that's a monster. We can max protect, or we can go with just, 3 routes and block and pick up these guys, pick up the blitz of Flores. and we can get Jamison Williams one-on-one with Harrison Smith, well, he's hanging at the line of scrimmage pre-snap and then bailing.
Yeah.
If those two get matched up, Jamo's got to have it. He's got to be able to have a 50-yard touchdown. Like, it is there. It was there last week. It was there multiple times. They weren't able to get to it. The Vikings without Byron Murphy, their corners, they're good. They're in position right now. They're playing unbelievable football. T. Higgins just flat out mossed their corners last week. It wasn't really anything else. For me in this game, Jamison Williams is probably one of my favorite plays, just because I think that deep touchdown's coming. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown has like a 30% target share against the blitz. Sam Laporta is just consistently getting open, finding that soft spot. Like, these guys, Laporta and Amon-Ra will be volume plays where they're getting the ball quickly, and it's whether or not they create that extra play or break the tackle and get out. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, has a lot of intriguing factors because, again, big play, breaking tackles. If Flores is bringing the blitz, like, he's playing a scheme that nobody's ever run. So it's a really hard thing to break down, but I feel like Ben Johnson, there's enough tape on tacking deep and down the middle of the field that they got to be able to get on the same page with. And obviously that's a Jared Goff stack. I didn't get to Jared Goff just because I like some of the other quarterbacks, and I feel like he's too pricey this week. But Jamison Williams is my favorite play on the Lions. And then flipping it over to the Vikings, obviously Ty Chandler's chalk. He's going to be one of the chalk running backs on the slate. I think there are running backs around him that are better. Personally, I think
up one and down one.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's up one and down one for sure. And then I would say up to Breece Hall at 61, but that's nor here. I just don't want to play the Ty Chandler chart because he ran really well. That was the Bengals, man. The Bengals have been bad all season long. The Lions are a much different, like, aggressive group. I don't think they're going to get beat on the ground. I think they'll get beat through the air. And Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson are the three players that I'm most interested in. Jay Jettas should just stay on the perimeter this week. I don't want him to go inside.
He should.
I don't want him to go inside. Brian Branch has been phenomenal in the slot. He's been dominant over the middle of the field. He's a guy where if Hawkinson's in line, I don't want them to go to Hawkinson. Like, I don't want them to attack Brian Burns. Brian Burns has been a significant impact on this team. He's one of their chess pieces. I can't wait till they get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back just to see what that scheme would really dial up. But for now, without Jerry Jacobs, who's on the perimeter corner, you have Jay Jettas and you have Jordan Addison, and both of them can kill them. I think I'm just going to stick to that. Two wide receivers, or the wide receivers are the ways I want to play this game. I don't mind Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins, if I'm playing him, I'm just going to play him with Addison and Jefferson and forget about it. I don't really want to get cute with it. I'll run it back with mainly Jamison Williams, but I'm not necessarily afraid of like Jahmyr Gibbs, or if I want to go to amon-ra just because the game environment. I think there's explosive plays in this game. I don't think there's methodical ones. And if I do not get to this game at all, I love the Vikings defense, because the way this game explodes is if Jamison Williams catches that long touchdown. The way this game fails is if Jared Goff, with this pressure-heavy defense, is getting pressured, because they're not going to run the ball. I don't think they're going to be running the ball effectively. I don't see it from the Detroit Lions. I know how good of a rushing attack they have. Brian Flores is just doing different things. I don't know what it is with this guy. I don't know how, like, he took Mike Tomlin's Tampa 2 and added Bill Belichick to it. And it's like, that's so, and Harrison Smith is the perfect chess piece. And Josh Metellus and Ivan Pace are amazing at what they've been doing. So overall, JMO's my favorite play. If you're not game stacking it, don't hate the Vikings defense. I do not want to play Ty Chandler. Hilo, how are you to play in this one?
I'm pretty aligned, dude. Brian Flores, dude, this fucking guy, he's showing us some things, man. He's doing some things. He'll, like, you see this like massive blitz rate and you're like, oh, okay, he just sends 5-6. No, this dude is sending like opposite, like weak side linebacker plus strong side safety on the same side. It's like, what are you doing, dude? This is awesome. But no, he's doing a lot of things. And then he'll he'll send like a weak side linebacker, a strong side safety, and then drop a defensive end in coverage. Like, what the hell? What
Yeah,
are you doing, dude?
it's
It's
they're.
insane.
I mean, Harrison. Not Harrison. Is it Harrison Phillips, the D tackle on?
Yeah.
He was talking about it, and he's like, "We're allowed to like my assignment isn't, hey, you got this gap. It's
Yeah.
hey, you're supposed to get this gap, but if you want to get this gap, go for it." And
Yeah,
he's
that's
like,
chill.
Brian Flores has talked, he's like joked around and told him like Harrison Phillips wants to call the coverage behind him because
Yeah,
Harrison
dude.
Phillips is getting feel like they're playing so just like there was multiple plays where Jake Browning's sitting shotgun with 8 people on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. You have no idea who's dropping
Ball
out.
gets snapped. It's only 3 rushers and 2 of
Yeah.
them are corners.
Yeah, dude.
Like the
It's
Neil
what are you
is
doing?
just dropping back.
It's awesome.
It's so
awesome.
much fun. But regardless, yeah. So for me,
As
I
a
think
fan of just football X's and O's, it's a lot of fun.
it's all he's been coaching amazing football. But regardless, like yeah, Harrison Smith on a deep ball to JMO. If you want to take JMO longest reception, I don't care what the line is. I am fine taking it. I took Rashid Shaheed's last night, and it was a good time. It was really easy. It was like, nice. I was like, they finally connected on it, and I actually cleaned house on that. Or I'll tell you after the show. But regardless, I love this game from that side. Now, Hilo, I will kick it to you to break down the Jaguars taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Are we just assuming Trevor Lawrence is healthy and that's what we're going to talk about?
No, I don't think you need to be honest.
Okay.
You have 2 defenses that are difficult to run on, and you have 2 defenses that have struggled on the perimeter. And what do you get? You get Mike Evans on the perimeter, and on the other side, there's some very interesting things to talk about, I think. Whether it is a concussed / hobbled, because we know that Trevor Lawrence is also nursing an ankle injury, whether it's an active yet concussed / hobbled Trevor Lawrence, or if it's CJ Beathard, I think is immaterial in this spot because of the weapons that they do have on the field. Zay Jones is doubtful. That we know that they're missing Christian Kirk on the IR. So it's basically we have Calvin Ridley on the perimeter and we have Evan Ingram at tight end, who is likely going to step into like a legitimate featured type usage player role. He's seen that come and go this season, and that's kind of what we get with the Jacksonville Jaguars when they're healthy. We know that they can move the ball through the air, but it's very difficult to tell like who it's likeliest to flow through. Knowing Evan Ingram, knowing that he has a high route participation rate already, knowing that he has a solid targets per route run rate, if he's still in a route at a ton and now his targets per route run rate is increasing, now we're talking about some significant upside. And I think that still holds true if it's Beathard under center, because Beathard is not a strong arm quarterback. He is a quarterback that's a veteran that is able to process a defense. I mean, look where he had his upbringing. It was way back in San Francisco. So this is a guy under Shanahan that like has experience about reading and diagnosing a defense. So you pair those 2 things, and I think the upside is still very clearly there for a guy like Evan Ingram, where his job is to beat man off the line. He can do it because he's matched up with either a linebacker or a safety. He's too fast for a linebacker and he's too big for a safety, or find the holes in zone coverage. So you get those 2 things coming together. I think it's a really nice spot for a guy in Evan Ingram who probably has a higher ceiling in this spot at his salary than comparable wide receivers in his range. Most of them, probably everyone in that range, not named Garrett Wilson. I really like him this week as well. So it's this interesting dynamic where Calvin Ridley is probably going to see the bulk of the ownership that lands on the Jags. You're probably going to see some Parker Washington. You're probably going to see maybe some Jamal Agnew after his long catch last week. I think the answer is staring us in the face with Evan Ingram. And I think you can do some interesting things this week because where he's priced, it kind of lends itself to more of a balanced build as opposed to the are ingrained in our soul as DFS players over the last like 5-6 years is to like, all right, where's my salary going? Who am I paying up for? I got to get this like high price guy on a 9-game slate where the two highest quarterbacks are playing each other in that Miami and Dallas game. The two highest wide receivers are also in that game. Two of the 4 highest priced running backs are in that game. It becomes very easy to say like, yo, what if that game just fails? Or what if no one from that game puts up a 40 burger and it doesn't matter? That to me kind of lends itself to an increased viability for these like middling or balanced type roster constructions. And I think Evan Ingram fits that almost to a T. On the other side, this is like the prototypical history of the 11, 12-year career of Mike Evans. Like this is the matchup we want to see. We want to see an inside out zone heavy or man defense. Like that's what he's getting in this spot against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So like, forget about Chris Godwin seeing double-digit looks in back-to-back games, for like the squeaky wheel narrative, all that. Like this just screams to me like a Mike Evans spot. So you can play them together. You can play only Ingram. But the good thing about like this spot as a whole is we kind of know where the volume's going in Tampa. We kind of know now where the volume's going in Jacksonville because the 4 primary pass catchers has turned into 2 primary pass catchers. And we get this pass funnel versus pass funnel matchup. So yeah, I think there's a lot of upside. I will be heavily interested in the skinny of Mike Evans and Evan Ingram. And I think it just, there can be like those 2 guys can be the like 30 plus point scorers in a game that's like 23-20. It doesn't have to like blow up for those 2 guys because of the level of concentration we expect here.
Yeah, I personally see this game as, again, a great spot for Mike Evans and also Calvin Ridley. I know that Beathard doesn't have necessarily a strong arm. Calvin's a double move killer in this Tampa Bay Bucks team. Like, I don't care how strong your arm is, they can't cover anybody. They're one of those teams that it's just awful. I do think that you are justified to taking that side of things. I think that a Baker double, like I think with the 9-game slate, if this game explodes, we could go Baker, Mike Evans with Kate on, which is actually surprisingly it's not popular, but it's a cheap tight end with Evan Ingram and Ridley, and just go for it. Like go be a high score point total. Obviously, if Trevor Lawrence plays, that changes a lot. I think you could just go Baker, Mike Evans, and Evan Ingram. Like that's very easy to do, and it's not it's expensive to an extent, but like I don't think the field's going to be playing that over what Nick Mullins is getting. Like the field's going to be very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where Baker lands in ownership this weekend, just because of his price, Mike Evans' price, the way the field is going, where the 2 top quarterbacks are, their pass catchers. It's a really intriguing slate. I think the field is just going to play Justin Fields, but
yes, which I have some stuff to say about. I've already said it today on a different show, but I'm not into Justin Fields this week.
We can get to that at the end of the show. I don't have much else to add here. Do you have anything else you'd like to say about this game? Because I agree with you on the run backs. I'm not playing the running backs. I'm not playing Rashad White. I'm not playing Travis Etienne. They're elite players, elite roles. We could find that at 5,800. We could find the exact same thing, which is wild to me to say that Chuba Hubbard's there, but that's nor here nor there. The last game we're going to talk about.
It's here and there, baby.
The last game of the games we chose. Anyway. Oh, you're going to 100% Chuba Hubbard, you sicko?
Yes.
I love Chuba Hubbard, actually. Yes. But I love him and Wicks. I wrote that up as a mini. But besides that, last game from our choosing before we get to that Dallas-Miami matchup, the Seattle Seahawks are traveling to Tennessee. Seattle, they're missing Jamal Adams. They're missing Frank Clark. Devon Witherspoon is questionable. And then Tennessee, Sean Murphy-Bunting, out. Kayvon Wallace, out. Jeffrey Simmons, out. Monty Hooker, out. Seattle Seahawks getting back Geno Smith probably. He almost suited up this past week, and obviously he's probably going to play this week. We want Geno Smith to get a weak secondary, and this is exactly that for him. This is a slate where we just talked about the high point totals, and there's not going to be a ton of them. Like, how do we get there? Well, Geno Smith is priced at 5,800. He is lower, projected to be around the same, like 7%. Like it feels like very flat in ownership outside of like Justin Fields and Nick Mullins. For me, this Tennessee Titans defense is just beat to the pulp. They can try to defend the run if they want to. They have the pieces to kind of do that, but they've been playing a lot of quarters lately. Quarters coverage, cover four. Geno Smith against quarters this year is averaging over 9 yards per attempt. He's been bad against cover one, which is very strange to say. He's been very good against quarters, very bad against cover one. So if they play that coverage, that's fine. And DK Metcalf's averaging like almost 4 yards per route run against it. DK Metcalf at 6,700 is the guy that I'm pairing with Geno. And then the secondary options, it's a coin flip between Tyler Lockett and JSN. And when it comes down to price, I just lean into JSN, who's a guy that I talked about him pre season as a guy that is going to get better as the season goes on. He's not going to come in and take Tyler Lockett's job. He's going to come in and then earn his role and earn his spot. We've seen them go more 11. We've seen that his route share just increase and increase. And then we see him make a huge play on a Monday night game where he catches a touchdown over James Bradbury, absolutely kills him. I think this is the game where DK Metcalf, Geno, and JSN get that explosion week. We've seen Tennessee be a bad secondary multiple times throughout the last few years. Gardner Minshew lit him up for like 350 or so. I think Seattle wants to run the ball. They want to be a physical team in that regard. I don't think Tennessee is going to mess around with a team trying to be more physical than they are. And as a result, that the way Seattle gets these big plays is through the air. It's through DK Metcalf. It's through JSN and probably some Lockett as well. There's no hate to Lockett. Lockett being twice the ownership of DK Metcalf and twice the ownership of JSN makes me lean away from him in this one. And then from a run back perspective, Derrick Henry looked awful last week. My God, was he just not the same Derrick Henry of old. He got the touches. He got everything from a usage standpoint that you want, but I'm not going to pay up for 6,800 Derrick Henry. The player I have a lot of interest in with Ryan Tannehill playing, and it's a player that played a ton with Ryan, or not ton. He played with Ryan Tannehill and saw a lot of single high coverages before and balled out in his rookie season. Hasn't had a lot of looks with Tannehill this year. It's Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks has not been good against single high this season. Treylon Burks has been through so many injuries that I'm not throwing away those metrics, but I'm looking past those metrics because I see a guy that is 3,100 in a game environment that, again, we're on a 9-game slate. It's not a ton. For some reason, DJ Montgomery is getting love right now. I think that's going to change once Pittman truly is in and everybody sees that he's active. But I don't think he's going to get a ton of love. We're looking for value on the slate. I think he can catch a deep ball. I think he can catch that big play. He did it last week. He had over 60 yards receiving last week. And he actually looked pretty much like Treylon Burks, the guy that I thought was the number one receiver, or not number one. He was probably like top 5 for me during that draft. I think he is going to be a good pro. He's just dealt with some unfortunate injuries. And if Ryan Tannehill is coming in and you're the Seattle Seahawks, I think the eyes will be towards DeAndre Hopkins. The eyes will be towards Derrick Henry, not letting either of them get going. And as a result, Treylon Burks will be able to get it done down the field and in single high type coverages, which is what Tennessee will generate just because Derrick Henry's name is back in that backfield. So Geno Smith, JSN, DK Metcalf, run it back with Treylon Burks. That is one of my cheaper stacks that I absolutely love this weekend. It sucks that the receivers are there's a lot of really good receivers this week. So taking up 3 receivers in this game isn't exactly what I love, but it is something that you're able to go get like a Tyreek Hill in this lineup. You're able to or go get CeeDee Lamb or amon-ra or Jay Jettas, and you could play your Evan Ingram, Mike Evans. You can get unique that way, which is something we just talked about. Hilo, how are you playing? Do you have any interest in this Seattle Tennessee game?
I don't really. And the reason is both of these teams would prefer to kind of grind out victories. So I'm looking for a spark. And I don't know where the spark would come from in this spot. I mean, we have Derrick Henry, who has historically been the spark for Tennessee. He's coming off of the lowest yardage output for a running back that has seen 20 plus running back opportunities in the history of the NFL. 20 touches, he had 10 yards. So, well, yeah, that's cool and all. Derrick Henry can very clearly still get there, but if this, and also on the other side of that, you mentioned a very interesting point. When we've seen injuries pile up, because we've seen Mike Vrabel be in Tennessee for a few years now, we've seen this team deal with defensive injuries. And instead of sticking to like what they had done before with their healthy bodies,
Yeah.
they have typically added an additional man to the box, and they've gone additional rates of cover 2 and cover 1 behind it. So yeah, that's very interesting to me. I don't know how they're going to react because, like you said, like Kenneth Walker is coming in. He missed 2 practices this week with a shoulder injury, I believe. Pete Carroll said today that he does expect him to play. I don't know. I just don't know how Vrabel is going to react to that. Being that we would expect him, based on historical tendencies, to stick 6-7 guys in the box when they're dealing with injuries. And that's typically where we've seen this Tennessee Titans defense struggle, is in order to compensate for the injuries, they start playing a lot more cover 1, 1 high, and cover 2, which typically they like to run cover 3. So yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces here. I don't see the spark, which leaves me wanting to stay away from game stacks. I don't mind any of those players you mentioned as one-offs, but for me personally, I think there's clearer paths to upside elsewhere from a game environment bet perspective.
Perfect. You're going to get this ownership down so that I could take advantage of it. Look at you, Hilo. That's
Power to the
perfect
people,
here.
baby.
But yeah, no, I don't disagree. I hope he sticks the extra man in the box just because, again, if you're the Seattle Seahawks, the one thing you want to see is Geno Smith throwing the football down the field and being effective when doing so, because that gives you a chance going into the playoffs, and you still got a long way to go to get there. So for me, that's kind of the way I view it, and hopefully we get there. But let's move forward to our final game. Dallas Cowboys traveling to Miami. Hilo, don't worry. It's not too hot out. We're in the 60s, 70s right now. Nice and like some sun. It's beautiful right here. So you're not going to be worried about the sun hurting your players being able to play. For those who didn't know, Hilo was scared of the weather for the heat of the Denver Broncos Miami game for that one. And then Miami scored 70 and reminded Hilo. We almost scored as much as it was temperature wise in that, or Miami Dolphins almost
cool, man.
But that's that. This game is a very intriguing one because, again, we've talked about all of the guys that are high priced, like CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. I wanted to do a Tua double with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I think that the Dolphins are in a spot against the Cowboys where the Cowboys just got dominated against the Bills, where they just pounded the rock over and over again. I think the Cowboys are going to over adjust there, and the Dolphins don't really have the running backs to do that, but also the Bills didn't with James Cook. They just did so. So I think the Cowboys are going to overcorrect on their run defense, and Jonathan Hankins is also out, which is a good run defender for them to kind of overcorrect, but they're not going to be able to defend the pass. And I think we just saw them try to man up with their Deron Bland against DK Metcalf. And we saw DK Metcalf go for 3 touchdowns, 140. And we forget about it because we just watched James Cook go for 180 on the ground and through the air. And it's like, wow, they could just, get beat. Teams are beating them with their best players. They're getting out talented. And Stephon Gilmore, as great as he is, I don't think that he's capable of just defending Tyreek Hill. And I think the field is going to stray away from a 9,600 Tyreek Hill with an ankle injury and in a matchup where it's really hard to get there. For me, I love Tyreek Hill. And then also Mike McDaniel. People forget Mike McDaniel took the job for Miami because he thought Tua was his perfect quarterback. And he thought Jalen Waddle was going to be a stud. You should go see the clip of him on the Dan Le Batard show. They asked him, like, for fantasy football, who's going to be the guy? And he went up to the screen and was yelling Jalen Waddle. He's like, Waddle. It's going to be Waddle. We're going to get him the ball all these ways. And then the Tennessee games happened where obviously all the injuries and different things. And he had a week to prepare, got some offensive line back, and then went, hey, you have these great corners. We're going to test you. If you go watch the Hard Knocks episode that just aired, the play Mike McDaniel's watching in the meeting room is the exact play they ran on the 60-yard touchdown to Jalen Waddle. And Tyreek Hill, during the wide receiver meeting, talked about Waddle needing to sell it inside so that he plants and goes, and it's going to be there. And again, Mike McDaniel's one of the best offensive minds in our game. I think this is his first, we're going to beat a team with a winning record. We're going to beat a team with a great defense. They're going to do it at home. The next question is going to be, can they do it on the road? Granted, whatever. And then on the flip side of it, Jalen Ramsey traveled with Garrett Wilson. I didn't expect Vic Fangio to do that, but Vic Fangio actually moved Jalen Ramsey around to Garrett Wilson. And then on top of it, I don't think Nathaniel Hackett was that creative with Garrett Wilson. So I guess you could kind of counter it that way. But in this matchup against CeeDee Lamb, there's a chance that he travels to an extent. I don't think he's going to every play, but I think he should as much as he possibly can. And then the Cowboys went 2 tight ends a lot against the Bills because of their offensive line issues. They still have those offensive line issues. So we might see them go more 12 personnel, which means you can't really hide CeeDee Lamb. If you can't hide CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Ramsey is going to get matched on with him. And if Xavier Howard doesn't play, the matchup that I absolutely love here is Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks, Tyreek Hill is the mini that I want to get to. I don't think it's Tony Pollard. I just don't see it from this offense line with possibly no Zach Martin. Tyron Smith's questionable. They have another offense line now. And I see a game where Brandon Cooks is possibly going to get Kader Kohu or Nick Needham, and that is got to be the matchup. Fangio runs a lot of zone stuff. Jalen Ramsey is not going to let CeeDee Lamb out of his sights if it's in his power. And if that's the case, I'm just not taking CeeDee Lamb against Jalen Ramsey at 9,200. I'll go pay down to Brandon Cooks at his price. Hilo, how are you playing this game? Do you have any interest in it? Do you think the field's going to get to it?
I think the field is going to try their damnedest. There's 2 very interesting aspects of the Jalen Ramsey discussion, and then one thing they'll bring up at the end about how this game could fail, because people are not going to be talking about how this game could fail. So just to plant those seeds. The Jalen Ramsey thing I forget when it was, but he went to Vic Fangio and said, hey, throw me on a shadow. I'm going to island Garrett Wilson because they have nobody else that can beat us. And Vic Fangio's like, oh, yeah, it's a good idea, bro. Let's do that. So it was actually Jalen Ramsey that went to Vic Fangio and said, hey, I should shadow Garrett Wilson.
That's wild.
Garrett Wilson plays primarily on the perimeter. They move him around the formation. They do some interesting things with him, but he does not play in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
So we have CeeDee Lamb, who plays almost 50-50 perimeter slot. And Jalen Ramsey, who to this point this season has not traveled in the slot. That does not mean that he can't, because 3 years ago he was a slot corner. With his time in Los Angeles. So there's very interesting aspects of this spot where we don't know how Vic Fangio is going to be treating this spot. We don't know if he's going to allow or make or whatever scheme Jalen Ramsey to go with CeeDee Lamb when he goes into the slot. We also know that CeeDee Lamb is a motion guy in this offense. We also know that he kind of sets the tone. There's a lot of interesting aspects just purely speaking to Jalen Ramsey and CeeDee Lamb, which all that does is it introduces a wide range of outcomes, because we don't know what we don't know. And all we can do is make the best decisions with what we have. So that one aspect leads to a situation where CeeDee Lamb now becomes interesting at low ownership if he's got a wide range of outcomes, and less interesting at high ownership. So that's kind of how I handle these situations. With a wider range of outcomes, I look to ownership to help me bias my decisions. The other interesting aspects about this game are with the Miami Dolphins. And we know this team is awesome. We know this team is more awesomer at home. They like to score points in the friendly confines of Miami. But this is an offensive line that is absolutely devastated with injuries. This is an offensive line that has struggled. You look at Raheem Mostert last week. He got there on the 2 touchdowns, but his efficiency outside the red zone was atrocious. So, and then he padded his yardage total in the fourth quarter in garbage-esque time. So, one, can the Cowboys get pressure on Tua? That is going to be key for the Dallas Cowboys. And then you have Tyreek Hill, who came out and said on yesterday, like, yeah, I don't know, man. I plan on playing. I can't cut for shit. It's like, oh, okay, that's noticeable, or that's notable. He came out and told the media, like, yeah, I'm having trouble cutting on this ankle because he had an ankle injury 2 weeks before injuring the same ankle again last week or 2 weeks ago. So that's 2 injuries on the same ankle. The first one, we didn't know much about it. We didn't know it was high, low, whatever. High, low. And the second one was almost like a mirror image. It was an outside turn. The defender fell on his ankle, whatever, rolled it. So at this point, it's like Tyreek Hill is going to push to play because he's chasing 2K. That's his goal. That's been his goal since before the season.
Yeah.
He's going to push to play. Then it's like, does he need to cut? Or do they need him to run double moves? Do they need him to run in-breaking stuff that is not just like a plant and go? Do they play him only on the right side of the formation so that his cuts are on his right foot instead of his left? There's a lot of unknowns with Tyreek Hill in this situation that, again, for me, invoke a wider range of outcomes. So the fact that this game, even though it carries the highest game total of the week, probably has a wider range of outcomes, both from a game environment sense, so how many points are scored and what's the game outlook look like, and from like an individual perspective of the skill position players, it carries a wide range of outcomes. So I'm more interested to see how ownership settles tomorrow morning and into Sunday to base those decisions, because as it stands right now that Tyreek Hill has had all these reports that he's going to play, the fact that a lot of people probably did not see that he said, I can't cut. It's just a weird spot for me. So like, if this game gets owned, if it gets steamed, if
I agree with that.
We start seeing like Jameson Williams get hyped, or some of these other low price guys that are perceived value that can open up the path to playing Tyreek Hill to CeeDee Lamb. The other interesting aspect, I guess, should be noted is it's very hard to like game stack this game. You know, Tyreek Hill is 9,600. You have CeeDee Lamb 9,200. You have we talked about both Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane are 2 of the top 4 priced running backs, and freaking Rachaad White is the highest priced running back on the slate. That kind of tells you what this slate is. But it's just a very interesting dynamic. I'm not going to pretend to say like I know how this game's going to play out. I'm just going to say, like, it has a wide range of outcomes. And if the field is on it, it's easier for me to not be on it. And if the field doesn't go there, that's when you like get this, like, hey, always play Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce at low ownership type syndrome situation.
Yeah,
that's my read on that one.
I'm interested to see how it, ends up being. Again, Tua, Waddle, and Hill were the ways that I was going to play it originally with the Brandon Cooks run back. But again, it was hard to play it. And it didn't feel like I was really getting that different from the field with it. I don't know. It just didn't bode well. But I do love Tyreek Hill if he's going to be low, because again, there are a lot of question marks. But you just said Tyreek Hill or Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce low. I remember when it was Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and Patrick Mahomes being low, and those were the days. That was a good time. I think week 1 against the Cleveland Browns was they went absolutely nuclear and nobody played them. But let's end the show. Let's get to our final 2 topics, our favorite value in the Slate Breaker. Hilo, who is your favorite value? Oh, you're muted. Look at you.
My favorite value is, no, I didn't mute. I was just moving my lips without speaking. My favorite value is Chuba Hubbard. You look at, he's had 25 touches, 24 touches over the previous 3 weeks. Is that yours, dude? Sorry. Okay, I'll go to.
No, I gotta know. I'll pivot. Don't worry. You go.
I'll go to Devin Singletary. Either one. We'll play both of them.
You said it. Go to him. I'm gonna say my guy, and it's gonna be disgusting now because this is your fault. This is your fault because this is a one catch, maybe. No, not a one catch. I mean, all right. So you got Chuba Hubbard. Finish your reasoning before we get to it. Why do you? Because the Packers stink.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy already seeing 25, 25, 24 running back opportunities each of the last 3 weeks, and now he finally gets a good matchup. That came against like kind of a demi murderer's row of rush defenses.
Yeah.
So now he gets a Packers defense that is just prevent. They're going to give up 5-6 yards per carry, and it's just you just take that to the bank.
Yeah, so he was mine. He was my fair value, but I'm going to go and talk about the guy that it's going to be a gross play, but again, we're looking for sub, 4K options at the receiver position. I've already talked about Jameson Williams. I've already talked about Traylon Burks. The third receiver that I will call my shot with, and it's tough to say, it's Tyler Scott. So hear me out.
That is tough to say. That's tough to hear, dude.
He has started to run more routes. He ran 60% of the routes last week against in a game where they were up on a Cleveland Browns team, and they also let Justin Fields drop back. He's a rookie. He's got speed. For me, on film, he looks faster than Darnell Mooney. He looks more explosive than Darnell Mooney. They've schemed him up from like a short yardage stuff when he gets onto the field. And if you're going to go to the Justin Fields, if you want to, Darnell Mooney or Tyler Scott is the way to play him with DJ Moore. I understand the target share. I understand that he hasn't had any crazy explosive plays. The Arizona Cardinals are a team that get beat deep, and they get beat by speed because they play, again, this hybrid cover 4 quarters type look where the safeties come down to the box. It's like a strange type of scheme, but regardless, I watched Jalen Hyatt do it. I've watched other wide receivers get it done with speed. Tyler Scott is a speed wide receiver. I think he is going to take over for Darnell Mooney and be the number 2 receiver in this offense. He's not going to be a great wide receiver going forward, but in a week where we need sub 4K options, he is one of the guys that I think is going to have a big play. I think if you get the 50-yard touchdown, that's good. That's all you need on a slate like this to go play some of the top tier guys. I know it's gross. This is your fault. This is not my fault. This is your fault. And I was going to have Chuba Hubbard. I haven't written down. And then again, I'll say my slate breaker, which is Tyreek Hill. I am very adamant about them realizing, first off, that they could do it with Waddle, which also puts into the Cowboys' brain like, oh God, we have to guard Waddle. And then Tyreek Hill, I don't care if he plays 45% of the routes. It does not matter. He's actually been better when he's played less for this Miami Dolphins team. It's one of the stranger things of the season. The games where he plays over 90% of the snaps, he is not as good as when he plays like 40% of the snaps. Tyreek Hill is a guy that at 9,600, he's not going to necessarily break the slate from a standpoint of, if you didn't have him, you're completely dead. But I think he has a spot where he could put up a 45-point total and you need him to win. So that is my slate breaker. Hilo, who is your slate breaker?
My slate breaker is Garrett Wilson. And the reason why people are going to see that, what's up?
It's the battle of a stoppable force meets an impenetrable option or penetrable option. That's the Cleveland. That's the Washington Commanders secondary versus the Jets passing offense. But I will say Garrett Wilson is out. He made my pool. Him and Breece Hall were the 2 guys, and I'm like, I'm going to one-off one of these guys. Oh, but one of them's getting one-off.
So Trevor Siemian came into the game in relief of a concussed Zach Wilson just before half of their last game.
Yeah.
People are going to look at the box score and see that Garrett Wilson saw 4 targets. If you dig deeper, which I did, we see that on 6 of Trevor Siemian's first 12 pass attempts, he targeted Garrett Wilson. 2 of those were negated by penalty, 1 on each team. So the first 12 times that Trevor Siemian dropped back to throw the football, he was targeting Garrett Wilson. All we've been waiting for all season is somebody that can get this man the gosh darn football. Just get him the football. We've seen 2 years now where Zach Wilson is just, for whatever reason, not capable of getting this man the football. He had one game, which happened 2 weeks ago, where he finally did, and Garrett Wilson went over 100 yards. Hooray. So, if Trevor Siemian just locks onto his alpha, which I think is a high likelihood chance of happening, he's not going to be, I don't think Trevor Siemian is going to be messing around with the Ty Conklins in the world. And that's why we had played Ty Conklin a couple times, or at least me this season with Zach Wilson, is because like he is so quick to abandon his first read. He's like a hamster on crack there in the backfield. He's just like, you see his feet and he's just like, you see his eyes, they're just fluttering everywhere. I'm like, dude, just like go through your progressions. So if Trevor Siemian can just like sit in the pocket, go through his progressions, get the ball to freaking Garrett Wilson, man. And I do like Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall, I mean, he had 3 games in a row with 8 or more targets. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I think that Garrett Wilson is probably going to go largely overlooked. He's in this like middle range of player pricing where he fits my hypothesis that balanced builds are plus EV this week. I think he can break the slate.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense. No, I do like the call of Garrett Wilson again. One of those two are the way that the Jets cover a -3 spread, and it could be both of them. It could be both that put up 15, 20-point outputs, and you don't see anything else from Trevor Siemian or any of the other offense. Like they can do it with defense, Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson and find a way to get it done. But that is all I have. Hilo, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we close up the show?
No, sir.
Nice. Good luck in your week 16 DFS builds. Good luck on that Saturday slate. I will be posting some notes. I've started already getting covered quarterbacks and running backs and getting to receivers, tight ends, and defenses later tonight. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Look forward to seeing Hilo at the top with his Garrett Wilson lineup and me at the top with the Tyler Scott lineup, because what better way to win a slate when I'm playing Tyler Scott? Because you made me say it. This is my fault. Highlight.
So you're gonna split half the winnings with me when it happens.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Thanks, man.
We're gonna go. I mean, Panthers play the Packers. We could just.
Dude, oh my god.
No, we're not gonna do anything. We're just gonna watch that game in misery. I hope we win. I hope we beat.
I hope we tie.
All right, Hilo. See you guys. Thank you all for tuning in.